Welcome everyone to the Bytes of Intelligence Podcast, hosted at Imperial College London. My name is Yash, and this podcast is where we explore the journeys of inspiring individuals shaping our world. It's an absolute honor to welcome Sahil Bloom as a guest for today. I'm so excited for this podcast. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll just give a quick introduction for those of the listeners who don't know you. So Sahil Bloom is my role model and an inspirational entrepreneur, writer, and content creator. Sahil is a remarkable individual. He graduated from Stanford University with degrees in economics, sociology, and public policy, and he initially made his mark as a pitcher for the Stanford baseball team. Despite his success after Stanford in finance and private equity, Sahil left kind of feeling unfulfilled and began to question the traditional definitions of wealth and success. Today, he has become a globally recognized thought leader, entrepreneur, and best-selling author of his new book, The 5 Types of Wealth. This book challenges traditional notions of success and offers a blueprint for building a meaningful life, balancing the 5 types, which we'll hopefully go into. I think personally, just your ability to distill the complex ideas into kind of actionable insights, that really resonates with me, as well as the fact that I genuinely feel your content's authentic and you share your ups and you also share your downs. So thank you so much for that. You've inspired me and hopefully you'll inspire someone listening today.
I'm very appreciative of the warm words, and I'm excited to have finally met you.
Thank you so much, Sahil. Okay, so we'll go straight into the first question. So normally when I speak to people on this podcast, I feel as though the childhood gives a little bit of background as to how you've become today. So I'm just curious, what was your journey through childhood and college? Were you always determined and focused and through university, or was it kind of you struggled with discipline and now you're a different person?
I've always been very disciplined. I come from a mixed race background. My mom is from India, born and raised, and my father is white from the Bronx, New York. And both of my parents, in their own unique ways, are extremely hardworking and disciplined. My mom sort of has that like immigrant mentality that a lot of us know well, and academic achievement was really the way that my family marked success. And I have an older sister who's extremely high achieving academically. I was not quite as high achieving academically. And so I channeled my discipline into something else, in part because I wanted to stand out in a different way. Right. I didn't feel like I could measure up to her in that way. And so I picked a different route. That was baseball originally. And I knew from a very young age that the only way for me to be successful at it was that I was just going to keep showing up. My grandfather, my mom's father, had told me, you'll achieve much more by being consistently reliable than by being occasionally extraordinary.
Amazing.
And I really took that to heart. I really believe that you can never bet against the person who just keeps showing up.
And this was a grandfather who actually went to Imperial, you said?
He did, yeah. So we're back at his old stomping grounds. I've never been, so this is a real treat.
That's incredible. I think you can be extraordinary sometimes, but being consistently determined is something which you just can't be. And I think that brings us to the hard work versus talent, because especially at university, I've kind of felt that coming in, you think you're quite smart at school, and then suddenly you enter and everyone else is as smart or probably smarter than you, and you kind of struggle with the imposter syndrome. Do you have any tips on someone who's grappling with the same problem?
It never goes away. You just get a little bit better at acting in spite of it. I felt extreme imposter syndrome publishing this book. I mean, the day
Really?
after,
Okay.
getting tons of, pats on the back, the world telling me I was great, all of these people celebrating me on the night of the launch. I didn't sleep that night. I was just racked with this like anxiety and fear and feeling like I didn't belong or that I was going to get found out. So that feeling never goes away. I mean, some of my mentors are like the biggest CEOs and well-known figures in the world, and they all talk about the fact that they still feel it.
Wow.
So it's really empowering to know, no matter where you are on your journey, that feeling never goes away. And it's the cost of entry for the growth that you've asked for. The thing that you are trying to achieve is pushing you beyond the bounds of what you feel you're currently capable of. And that means that you are going to feel that imposter syndrome. But it's just part of the journey.
Okay, that kind of makes it a bit more natural. And
the other piece is like, talent is genuinely overrated. Like, I think there's a baseline level of talent and intelligence that is useful to have in life. But frankly, there's almost a diminishing return to it. Like, I have seen a lot of people who are extremely smart and talented get in their own way at some point because they get too stuck in their own thoughts and in their own head. Like, my friends who have achieved the most are not the smartest. They just have a bias for action, genuinely, that is superior. They are smart, don't get me wrong. They're not idiots, but they don't allow their intelligence to get in the way of their capacity for action and their adaptability. And at the end of the day, that's a very different skill set than the intelligence. Like my friends who had the highest IQs or who got the best grades in school are not the ones that are making the most money now.
Okay, that's actually really interesting to know. And it kind of leads me to the second question, that you had a pivotal moment in your life when, despite achieving the success which all of us at this stage would dream of, you've got the high-paying job, you've got the fancy cars, the house, but you felt unfulfilled. So can you walk me through that realization and how you actually took that massive pivot to changing your life around now?
Yeah, I had a conversation with an old friend. We sat down for a drink and he asked how I was doing. And I told him that it had started to get difficult living as far away from my parents as I was. I was 3,000 miles away, living on the other side of the country. And he asked how old they were. And I said mid-60s. And he asked how often I saw them. And I said about once a year now. Okay. And he just looked at me and said, okay, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die.
Wow.
And that was the moment that changed my life, because it fundamentally shined a light on the fact that your time is your most precious asset. Mm-hmm. And these moments with the people that we care about are finite. They are impermanent. You are never going to get these moments back. And so if you don't value that in the way that you should, if you're chasing money, status, and things at the expense of everything else, you're going to wake up one day and regret it. And that was what sparked me to just start thinking about, is there a more comprehensive way to measure and value my life so that I can make better decisions that actually lead to, winning the battle and the war?
Wow, that's really meaningful, because I feel like many students right now, our aim is money. Like, we hate to say it, but everyone says money does not equal happiness. We understand it in the moment and then we forget about it. Because personally, for now, I'm doing computer science. I joined university thinking I'm really curious about all these things. Now in my second year of university, I'm already falling into the top investment banks, trying to apply to all of those.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Just to be clear, nothing in this book says that money doesn't matter. And frankly, one of the 5 types of wealth and the whole section on financial wealth.
Right.
In your 20s and 30s, in your university years, focusing on and prioritizing financial wealth is a good decision. Money does directly buy happiness in the early years of your life. It reduces fundamental burdens and stress. You can take care of the people around you. It has a ton of utility, and it allows you to think more clearly about these other things later. The point is that you can't turn off these other areas of your life.
Right.
I had done that. I had been so focused narrowly on making money in my 20s that I lost sight of the other things. There was no reason that I was only seeing my parents once a year. That shouldn't have been the case. That was just me turning off those other switches in my life rather than continuing to invest in them in some small way. So that's an important point, is just to say, like, there's nothing wrong with the pursuit of money. It just can't be the only thing that you pursue.
But do you think that the reason you kind of thought about this was that you'd experienced the top and then you had the realization? So if you had a time machine and you went back to being 20, would you actually change your path and not do those long hours? Or would you want to do that so you can yourself realize, this is not what I want to do? I
wouldn't change what I did, because I think it's an important message that I can now share with the world. And if I went back and changed it, I wouldn't have this message to share. That being said, I think I could have avoided a lot of pain by doing it differently. I think I could have still achieved the same level of financial success I did and not had my relationships deteriorate in the way they did. I not drank 6-7 nights a week and seen my health deteriorate. I just think I didn't think of it that way.
Right.
It wasn't that I didn't have the time to invest in those things. I just would sit at home on the weekend or work rather than working on a plane to go see my family, or rather than doing the one health thing that I was skipping out on. Like, whatever those things were that I was allowing myself to sacrifice, it was much more of a mindset shift that I just wasn't thinking about them.
That makes sense. And the one thing which I wanted to follow up on was that sometimes when you feel disciplined, so I sometimes feel disciplined, I feel super optimistic, super engaged, but then there's that dip, and then in that dip, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, you just don't do anything, you don't go to the gym, you feel really kind of unmotivated. How do you kind of stay at that neutral, and what advice would you have to someone struggling with that at this stage in their life?
You have to recognize that anything above 0 compounds. So it's not about doing the perfect thing every day. It's not about I'm trying to go to the gym, so I have to go to the gym an hour every single day. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Like life gets in the way. You know, if you're older, your kids keep you up all night, or, you know, you have a job thing or some stressful project at school, whatever it is. Sometimes you're not going to be able to do that.
Right.
But going to zero, just doing nothing, is when compounding stops. That halts it and you start to atrophy. So on those days when you feel bad, just set a minimum viable version that you still go and do. Like, you can still go for a 15-minute walk.
Okay.
Say you're trying to go to the gym, you're trying to be more active and fit.
Right.
On the days when you feel terrible, commit to doing a 15-minute walk. On the days when, you know, you don't feel like doing any work or whatever the thing is, commit to reading for 15 minutes. Whatever it is, just do the tiny, boring basics, because anything above zero compounds.
Okay, perfect. And that actually brings us nicely to the point of purpose in life. I feel as though, personally, growing up in London and being academically quite strong, I went to Imperial and I had that purpose of I want to do computer science, but I didn't actually know why. And now I'm kind of struggling to find that meaning. Do I want to be a software engineer, but writing code all day, is that meaningful? So what advice would you have to someone who's 20 years old right now and struggling to find the actual purpose? Because it feels like quite a vague word, purpose.
Your purpose in your 20s is just to build a foundation for the rest of your life. It doesn't really matter what you do. Frankly, like the job you take doesn't really matter. The thing you study in school doesn't really matter. What really matters is that you are investing in building a foundation. And that foundation applies across a bunch of areas. It applies to your financial foundation, creating a pool of savings and investments. It applies to your relationships, building a foundation of strong relationships and a network that you can compound off of. And it applies to your knowledge base, the skills that you're actually creating and acquiring that are going to be leverageable for the rest of your life. So when I was 20, if I were you today, that's really what I would define my purpose around, because then I can connect a whole lot of different things to that. Like anything I'm studying, I can think about, okay, is this stacking bricks on the foundation that I'm trying to build? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, I shouldn't be doing it. I don't need to be spending time on this thing. But that is kind of like a broad way of thinking about purpose in your 20s that I think really helps.
So would you recommend that if you're at university now, would you focus on grinding as hard as you can to get that six-figure job? Or would you focus more on really focusing on your relationships, your college life, having fun, having nights out?
I don't think it's an and or. I don't think it's an either or. Okay. I do think that like you need to you need to think about what area of your life is turned up. Like, okay, what is the main focus? What is the main thing? Is that trying to get the prestigious job that's going to set you up financially early on? Or is it, your friends and partying? Uh-huh. I think for most people, the thing that's going to set them up best for the rest of their life is pushing and putting their head down and grinding a little bit to go get that thing that's going to start you off on the right path in your compounding engine. That doesn't mean having zero friends, shutting off your entire social life and turning off everything else around your health and purpose or whatever. It just means that you kind of pick what the main thing is during this period. I don't think there are very many people who end up regretting that they really focused on learning and growth during school. You get a lot of those people that will criticize you for doing that, saying, oh, you're sacrificing all of this fun and all of these things. I'm like, I did that in college. I had baseball and I had school. I didn't party a whole ton. I didn't do any of those things. My friends that partied a whole ton and didn't take advantage of the academics, they're the ones that regret it. Okay. Just to be totally honest. And I'm not saying that to be harsh, but it's you get one shot at this unique opportunity where you're surrounded by smart, interested people. You have professors that are incredible. You're in this incredible environment. It's your own version of 16th century Florence, where the Medicis were funding all of this activity, and all of the most amazing architects, designers, artists all came to Florence at the exact same time, and it created this incredible flourishing that sparked the Renaissance. That is what universities are, and you can take advantage of that to be a propellant for the rest of your life, an accelerant for the rest of your life, but only if you lean into things that you're excited about.
Okay, brilliant. And I have a couple last questions. So when you meet someone who's more senior than you, so I think you spoke about Tim Cook, you met him at the gym and now he's kind of your mentor. So what questions do you ask to actually get the most out of these connections? Because they're quite unique networks to have.
I approach every single person that I engage with, whether they're above me or below me or whoever I meet, assuming I'm going to know this person for 50 years.
Nice.
So what would I do if I'm going to know this person for 50 years? If I'm going to know you for 50 years and we just met, I'm not going to ask you for something straight out of the get-go. I'm not going to, come with like the intention of saying like, what do I ask to get the most out of this interaction? I would just think about, okay, how can I add value to you probably? How can I be, someone that is interesting, that is asking interesting questions, that is sharing interesting insights? That's much more how I would default, is to this idea of like create value, receive value.
Definitely. Okay. And in your book, you mentioned that that question of, do you want to be dancing at the age of 80? And I really love that, because I remember reading some quotes saying, don't live the same year 75 years and say that's your life. So what kind of advice would you have to someone who's kind of starting now, 20, 30, 40, that what do you need to do to actually build a life when you're dancing at the age of 80?
You need to invest in all of these areas of your life that we talk about. You can't focus on the one thing at the expense of everything else. I think the single most important thing is that you invest in your relationships on a daily basis. Okay. You invest in the people, because at the end of the day, life is about the people. The best business and financial opportunities I have in my life are the result of people, not the result of any dramatic intelligence or talent or idea that I happen to have. It's the result of being around people that are really smart, interesting, hardworking, have a bias for action. And that is because I've invested in relationships my entire life. It's probably the one thing that I'm confident I am one of the best in the world at. And I think that is probably a mindset that more people need to adopt.
Okay. And at this age where I'm 20, I feel like it's quite confusing. Social media is amazing in some ways, but in other ways, there's so much advice around. You can listen to countless motivational people all day, but you can't actually do anything. So do you have any advice for someone who listens to so much, but doesn't actually put it into practice, and what they can do to get started?
Go do something. Dopamine from information gathering is a dangerous drug.
Right.
People are getting their dopamine from gathering information. You're reading the book and getting a dopamine hit from reading the book, but not actually going and doing anything with it. And so the whole idea has to be shrinking your information action gap. The gap between the information you gather and the action you take on that information needs to be razor thin.
Okay.
That is the common thread among the world's most successful people. It's that they act on information very, very quickly. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the right action, but they do an action. And an action creates new information that you can then adjust to and adapt around. And the best people in the world, they're doing that very quickly. They're getting better very, very quickly as a result. The worst are the people that just gather a bunch of information, never do anything with it, so you never get better because you're not taking the action that provides that new information.
That's really interesting. And finally, I wanted to wrap up on a couple of questions about the future. So obviously, from the outside, it seems that you've got everything now. Obviously, I'm not sure if that's how you feel, but you've really realized what makes you happy and you're focusing on that. But you're obviously relatively young as well. So what's next for you? What motivates you every day to keep going?
I want to positively impact 1 billion lives. Wow. Yeah, exactly. Your reaction means it's a big goal.
I respect it.
No, it's good. It's I think like, when you say something like that and people kind of have this like, whoa, that's how I feel when I say it, even to myself. I want to go deeper on this idea. I just put this book out into the world. This is sort of a rock into the pond. And now my whole goal is to create a whole lot of ripples around it.
Definitely. You've made a ripple here, and I think you're going to impact loads of lives. So thank you so much for doing that. And finally, I wanted to end on a quick round of quick fire questions, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. So if you could instantly master any skill that kind of is unrelated to anything you've talked about here, what would that one skill be?
Oh man, that's an interesting question. What is the one skill I would want to master? I guess I would probably try to master like the use of AI tools.
Okay.
Just because I think it would be interesting to actually understand some of the stuff that's happening right now.
Okay. Second question is, you've got your really sweet son called Roman. What's one piece of advice if you had to give to him now? He's, I think, 4 years old, you said? Or
2.5.
2.5, sorry. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's your son who's 2.5?
You can accomplish and achieve absolutely anything you set your mind to, as long as you're willing to put in the work to achieve it.
Okay, wow. That's really meaningful. In your book, you say that the greatest discoveries in life come not from finding the right answers, but asking the right questions. If you could ask your 20-year-old self one question, what would that be? Sorry, I know these are tough questions off the back.
If a third party were to observe your actions for a week, what would they say your priorities are? And how aligned is that list with what you would say your priorities are? because there's a big gap sometimes between what we say our priorities are and what our actions show our priorities are. And closing that gap is how you live a better life.
I remember when you were 20, I think you wrote a letter to yourself. Now, could you just quickly touch on that, what that was about?
Yeah, I wrote a letter to my future self when I was 23, just graduating from college, to open in 10 years. I opened it right before this book draft was due, so it actually ended up making it into the book. And it was just a list of my like kind of hopes for the future, the things that I hoped I was doing or that I was living or how I was living, the values that I was espousing. And it was really eye-opening and enlightening as an activity and as a journey.
I think I'll probably do that when I'm graduating college. If you could sit down and have dinner with one person, past or present, who would that be?
Probably my grandfather. He passed away in 2005, unfortunately, and he was the one that went to school here. He was an amazing, amazing man, and he gave me a lot of advice when I was young, and I would just love to get the updated version of that now as an adult. That's
really, really inspiring, and I think, just to see how much of a ripple he made in the chemistry field, I think you're doing the similar thing, but helping people's lives. And finally, what's an ideal day for you today?
Pretty much what I'm getting to live when I'm at home and not on this book tour. I wake up super early. I do my writing in the morning, and my son wakes up. We all have breakfast together. Then I go do my training and gym stuff. Then I have lunch with my family. Then have an afternoon of different kind of work and business projects, and then early dinner, sauna in the evening, and go to bed. Beautiful. It seems a lot of that revolves around family. So if you had to give one final piece of advice to someone who's just turned 20, so I turned 20 6 days ago, what would that one piece of advice be? Identify the things that truly matter to you, and then go take some tiny action to build your life around those things. Perfect. Well, I think that's the best place to end the podcast. Thank you so much for your time, for coming here and speaking to us. And to anyone who wants to learn more, I think definitely would recommend reading The 5 Types of Wealth. But thank you for inspiring me, and thank you for your time. Thank you. Perfect.